Let's look at constructors with default arguments. Since constructors are special member functions, they have all properties which are applicable on functions. Just like functions can have default arguments, even constructors can have default arguments. Now look at this. I have declared a constructor. This is a constructor declaration. The name of the constructor is complex. That means the name of the class is complex itself. Now this constructor will take in two parameters. The first parameter is real and it is of type float. The next parameter is imaginary, which is of type float. Now the interesting thing is I'm giving it a value. See, I'm assigning the value 0 to imaginary. What does it mean? Whenever you are declaring a constructor or whenever you're defining a constructor, if you decided to give it a value, if you decide to give an argument, or if you decide to give a parameter of the constructor a value, then that parameter becomes a default argument. That argument becomes a default argument. And remember, all such default arguments must be the trailing ones. That means all your default arguments should appear at the end of the declaration of the constructor or definition of the constructor. See, here this default argument appears at the end of the list. So you should always have your default arguments written from right to left. If any default argument appears in the middle, or if any default argument appears at the beginning, then what will happen is that will produce a compile time error. That means if I have something like this, let's say I have a class called demo and I'm defining a constructor. Let's say I'm declaring the constructor. And if I write something like this, int x equal to 0, comma, int y. Now this is an error. This will lead to an error. Why? Because this is a default argument, but the default argument does not appear at the end. That means after this default argument, I have another argument. That will never happen. A default argument will never be followed by another argument which is not a default argument. That means, see, this is a default argument. This is followed by another argument which is not a default argument. This will never be the case. But something like this is allowed. If I have int x equal to 0, comma, int y equal to 1. This is perfectly fine. See, a default argument is followed by another default argument. That is okay. But a default argument will never be followed by a non-default argument. Okay. So this is the meaning of default arguments should be trailing ones. That means they should always be written from right to left. So I hope this part is clear. Now, look at the two declarations that I have. Rather, two invocations of the constructor. See, here my class is complex. So I have created an object C1. Now this C1 object of class complex is instantiated by passing the value 5.0. Now what will happen? This will invoke my constructor. Now 5.0 is fine, so I'm passing only one argument. If I'm passing only one argument, that means 5.0 will be given to real. And since I have not specified any value for imaginary, the imaginary part for this object will get a value of 0. Okay. Now what about this? Now here, see, I have declared an object, or I have instantiated an object C2, and I've passed the values 2.0 and 3.0. Now this 2.0, fine, it goes to real. Now whenever I pass an actual parameter, see, actual parameter when specified overrides the default value. So actual parameter, this part, actual parameter when specified will override the default value. See, here I have specified the actual parameter is 3.0. Whenever I specify the actual parameter, then it will override this default value. That means imaginary will no longer be 0, it will be replaced by 3.0. Okay, so this is how default constructors, or constructors with default arguments rather, work. So if you can have any doubts, you can leave them in the comment section below. Thank you.